The salt wasn't a cure. It was a self-prescribed medication. That was the mantra I repeated while signing the Everest of paperwork, trading a life defined by catastrophic models and recycled air for the perpetual, rhythmic breathing of the Pacific. My new home wasn't a palace. It was a modest, single-story relic from the 70s, boasting good bones and a slightly weary facade, perched at the very precipice of the Azure Point development. It was the last house on the lane, the one that bore the brunt of the wind, the salt spray, and offered the most unfiltered, cinemascope view of the horizon. To me, that view, that raw connection to the planet's pulse, was worth more than any marble foyer in the world. My previous life had been a high-stakes tightrope walk over a chasm of probability. I was a hydrographic engineer, but that title was a sterile simplification. In reality, I spoke the language of water in all its forms: storm surges, liquefaction events, and the terrifying, silent propagation of tsunamis. I had spent 30 years advising governments, telling them where to build their walls and why. But the true weight of the job wasn't in the calculations. It was in the sleepless nights spent watching satellite data. My mind a churning sea of variables, while entire coastlines held their collective breath. I was done. I craved silence. I wanted to feel the sun on my face without instinctively calculating atmospheric refraction, to watch the tide without mentally charting its potential for devastation. My study, however, was a betrayal of this newfound peace, lined with bookshelves. It also housed a custom-built server rack and a triptych of monitors, ostensibly for writing my memoirs. This command center was a deeply ingrained habit I couldn't shake. It was linked to seismic sensors, deep ocean buoys, and meteorological satellites. My old credentials still granted me access to the global data streams. I called it a hobby, but it was more like a veteran sleeping with a hand on his weapon. My particular obsession was the Aleutian Trench, a colossal subduction zone thousands of miles to the northwest. It was the primary threat vector for this stretch of coast, a sleeping dragon that regularly twitched in its slumber. And for the past few months, its seismic chatter had been increasing in frequency and intensity. It was nothing alarming yet, just a faint, statistical murmur, but it was enough to make me choose this specific spot for my retirement. I wanted a front-row seat. My first project here was to rebuild the property's seawall. It was a pathetic, crumbling line of concrete and mismatched rocks, more of a decorative border than a defense. The original developers of Azure Point, a company that went bankrupt after a major winter storm in the late 90s, had clearly cut corners. Decades of tides had scoured its foundation, and winter gales had left it fractured. It was a tangible problem I could solve with my own hands. For the first month, I was in a state of grace. I was up at dawn, hauling bags of specialized marine concrete, sourcing granite boulders from an inland quarry, and setting each stone with the precision of a watchmaker. I wasn't just building a wall. I was building a bastion, using techniques from projects 10,000 times this scale. I engineered an interlocking revetment with a deep, reinforced toe to prevent undermining, and calculated the perfect logarithmic curve to dissipate wave energy. It was, I admit, absurdly over-engineered for a single home, but the work soothed a part of my soul that had been frayed to the breaking point. The piece lasted exactly 34 days. Her name was Carol Ann Miller. She materialized one Tuesday morning at the edge of my lawn, as if summoned by a shift in barometric pressure. She was a woman sculpted from suburban entitlement, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked immovable in the stiff sea breeze, expensive athletic wear that had never known exertion, and a visor pulled down with the aggressive precision of a drill sergeant. In her hand, she held the symbol of her office, a clipboard. "Mr. Cole," she chirped, the sound like a seagull stealing a chip. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. I was wrestling a half-ton piece of granite into place with a system of levers and rollers, covered in sweat and dust, and happier than I had been in a decade. "Just Alex is fine," I said, offering a neighborly smile. "And you are?" "I am Carol Ann Miller," she announced, as if unveiling a monument to herself. "President of the Azure Point Homeowners Association." She tapped a pen against her clipboard. Thwack, thwack. "We have a problem here. Alex." My smile became a line. "Oh, what's that?" Her gaze swept over my meticulous wall, her nose wrinkling. "This monstrosity." She gestured at the curving, formidable structure of dark gray granite. "It's not in compliance." I blinked. "Not in compliance. It's a Class 4 energy-dissipating revetment. It's on my property." "It is an unapproved exterior modification," she stated, flipping a page. "Article 7, Section C, Subsection 4 of the Azure Point Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions. All exterior structures must conform to the community's pre-approved aesthetic palette." Aesthetic palette, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Carol Ann, with all due respect, this is a functional hydroengineering structure designed to prevent this property from being reclaimed by the ocean. The materials are chosen for their mass and durability, not to match your hydrangeas." Her face hardened. "The approved palette is whitewashed concrete, river rock, or decorative sandstone. Your industrial eyesore uses dark, jagged quarry stone. It ruins the uniform, serene beachfront view for everyone. It looks aggressive. It looks unsafe." The irony was so thick, I could have built a wall with it. "The jagged nature of the riprap breaks up wave action more effectively," I explained, my voice tight with forced patience. "The dark color is the natural shade of high-density granite, which is far superior to porous sandstone. This coast has a history. Carol Ann, pretty walls don't stand up to history." Her eyes flashed with something more than just annoyance. It was a flicker of genuine anger, almost of fear. "Don't you dare," she hissed, her voice low. "Don't you dare talk about history. We have worked for 20 years to rebuild the image of this community, to make people feel safe here. Your ugly fortress of doom is a scar, a constant reminder of things people want to forget. It's fear-mongering in stone." I was taken aback by her intensity. This was more than a power trip. This was personal. "I have all the city and coastal permits," I said, my voice hardening. "We are not the city," she snapped, recovering her smug composure. "The HOA has stricter standards, designed to protect our property values and our peace of mind. You have 14 days to submit a modification plan, or you can begin demolition. Failure to comply will result in daily fines." She made a vicious little checkmark on her sheet. "Have a wonderful day." She turned and marched away. I stood there, watching her go, the rhythmic sigh of the ocean suddenly sounding less like peace and more like a ticking clock. I had come here to escape battles, but I had just stumbled into a war against a woman who was fighting the ghosts of her past. A woman who would rather have a pretty illusion than an ugly truth. The first formal notice was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese, citing Article 7 and levying a fine of $100 per day. Retroactive to Carol Ann's inspection. A spiky, handwritten note at the bottom read, "A whitewashed wall would look so much cleaner. Let's keep Azure Point beautiful and positive." My first instinct was to fight her on her own terms. I compiled a dossier geological survey maps, bathymetric charts of the offshore channel that could funnel wave energy right at our cove, and historical tide data. I even ran a few quick simulations on my system, showing the catastrophic erosion potential under a moderate, once-in-a-decade storm event. This wasn't just about my house. The collapse of my bluff would endanger the two adjacent properties. I requested a formal hearing. The board consisted of Carol Ann, a retired dentist named Arthur, who looked perpetually lost, and a woman named Brenda, who nodded at Carol Ann like a bobblehead doll. It was a show trial. I laid out my case, spreading my charts and graphs on the table. As you can see, I began, the stability of this entire section of the bluff is at risk. This isn't just about my house. It's about the rules. Alex, Carol Ann said, cutting me off. She patted a thick binder of HOA covenants. The rules are what protect our property values. It was then that Arthur, the dentist, piped up unexpectedly. He has a point. Carol Ann. We all remember the storm in '98. Wiped out half the promenade. My brother-in-law lost his entire business. A tense silence fell over the room. Brenda stopped nodding. Carol Ann's jaw tightened. That is precisely my point. Arthur, she said, her voice dangerously sweet. That storm was a tragedy that nearly destroyed this community. Property values plummeted. It took years to rebuild. Not just the homes, but the trust. Our covenants, our aesthetic palette, are the bedrock of that trust. They guarantee stability and a serene, safe appearance. Mr. Cole's wall is the exact opposite. It's a monument to fear. It screams danger. And that is the last thing we need. It's a monument to physics, I countered, stunned. She was twisting logic into a pretzel. It's acknowledging a reality. It's depressing, Brenda chimed in, finding her courage. It makes me anxious just looking at it. The appeal was denied. The fines would continue. I walked out of the clubhouse into the brilliant sunshine, my folder of useless data under my arm. Her motivation was now terrifyingly clear. She wasn't just a power tripper. She was the high priestess of a collective delusion. The community had suffered a trauma, and her response was to enforce a mandatory, fragile beauty, believing that if they could control the view, they could control the sea itself. My wall wasn't just a violation of the rules. It was a violation of their shared denial. A few days later, before the conflict could escalate further, I noticed something on my monitors. A magnitude 4.2 tremor, originating from the Aleutian Trench. Insignificant to the world, but it was the strongest chatter yet. The next morning, the tide was unusually low, exposing a swath of green, slick rocks and the skeletal remains of an old fishing trawler none of the locals had seen in 50 years. It caused a bit of a stir. People took photos, marveling at it. They saw a curiosity. I saw the ocean drawing a deeper breath. I went out and meticulously checked every seam on my wall. 2 weeks after the farcical meeting, the escalation I expected arrived. Scrawled across the dark face of my seawall, in huge, dripping letters of fluorescent pink spray paint, were the words, "Tear it down." The vandalism was a violation. But I had been expecting it. I spent the morning scrubbing away the paint, a faint pink ghost remaining as a scar. That afternoon, I drove to the city and purchased a set of 4K, low-light security cameras, concealing them with practiced ease. My sanctuary was now a fortified monitoring station. It took only 3 nights. The motion sensor pinged my phone at 2:14 a.m. The night vision feed showed 2 teenagers, clumsy and loud. One of them armed with a crowbar. He wedged it between 2 stones and, with his friend's help, managed to pry a section of the upper wall loose. It tumbled to the sand below. Then, the lead vandal snapped a picture of his work, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. Kyle Miller, Carol Ann's son. I saved the encrypted video files. It was a powerful piece of leverage, but it was too soon to use it. A slap on the wrist for juvenile vandalism wouldn't stop her. She was using her son as a deniable asset, moving from official channels to harassment. The next morning, I began repairing the wall. As I worked, I saw her standing on her second-floor balcony, a mug in her hand, watching me with a look of cold satisfaction. She thought she was winning. She had no idea the silent, hidden lenses were watching right back, gathering the hard data that would eventually seal her fate. Having failed to break me with fines or vandalism, Carol Ann shifted her campaign to my reputation, using the Azure Point Neighbors Facebook group as her personal propaganda machine. Her first post was a masterclass in veiled accusation, a beautifully filtered photo of the beach with my jarring wall slashing through the serene landscape. The caption was pure poison. So important we all do our part to maintain the beauty and harmony of our community. It only takes one selfish project to spoil the view for everyone. Community. First, protect our views. The comments from her loyalists were swift and vicious. I was being tried and convicted by people who couldn't see my wall from their homes. I was tempted to wade in with my engineering reports, but I knew it was useless. It would be my word against their queens, and I was the outsider who didn't understand how things are done here. A week later, she escalated to outright slander. After a heavy rain, a small, harmless trickle of rust-colored water seeped from the base of the wall natural mineral runoff. Carol Ann posted a close-up photo. Her caption, a firestorm of feigned panic. Very concerning. Notice this disgusting-looking runoff coming from the unapproved structure. It looks like some kind of chemical leak. Worried about the environmental impact on our beautiful beach, I've already filed a report with the county. Safety first. Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy with the ugly wall. I was a monster poisoning their children and pets. The social isolation was immediate and brutal. Neighbors averted their gazes. A woman at the local market physically pulled her child away from me. I was a caricature, a villain she had painted for them. One evening, staring at the digital mob sharpening their pitchforks, I called my old colleague, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a world-renowned seismologist in Tokyo. Alex-san, how is your retirement? It's eventful. Kenji, I said. I explained the situation, and then moved on to my real concern. What are you seeing from the trench? His voice grew serious. The tectonic strain is building faster than our models predicted. Alex, the slip deficit is significant. We are in a period of heightened risk. How is your wall? It's the ugliest, most beautiful thing I've ever built. I said. Good, he replied. Aesthetics are a luxury for those who have never seen the sea angry. The ignorance of a crowd can be as dangerous as any wave. They may not listen until it's too late. His words confirmed my own deep-seated anxiety. Carol Ann wasn't just building a case against me. She was actively cultivating a crop of lethal ignorance, making her neighbors fear the cure, not the disease. She was dismantling their survival instinct, one Facebook post at a time. And I knew her next move would be to legitimize her campaign of misinformation by bringing in the authorities. Carol Ann, true to form, began weaponizing the bureaucracy. First came a young, earnest man from county code enforcement, armed with her complaint and printouts of her Facebook photos. I showed him my stamped permits and the material safety data sheets. He left, looking confused, but satisfied that no rules had been broken. Next came a woman from the Environmental Protection Division. She took soil and water samples. 2 weeks later, a letter confirmed the runoff was harmless iron oxide. Undeterred, Carol Ann went for the kill. She filed a formal complaint with the State Coastal Commission. a body with the power to override local permits and order demolition. I was summoned to a hearing in the state capitol. The hearing room was an intimidating, wood-paneled chamber. Carol Ann, in a sharp business suit, presented an emotional slideshow about the character of the community and the aggressive industrial fortification that was an affront to nature. She even claimed, with no evidence, that my wall was altering beach erosion patterns. When it was my turn, I unrolled the full, detailed schematics of the wall. But I didn't stop there. I connected my laptop to the projector and brought up my own data. "Commissioners," I began. "My name is Alexander Cole. For the better part of 3 decades, I was a senior hydrographic engineer. I didn't design this wall based on aesthetics. I designed it based on this." I showed them the LiDAR scan of the seabed, the funnel-like channel pointing directly at our cove. Then, I showed them something else. This is the historical seismic data for the Aleutian Trench subduction zone. As you can see, the frequency of precursor tremors has increased by 400% in the last 6 months. The tectonic strain is approaching critical levels. Based on my models, there is a statistical probability of a major seismic event, magnitude 8.5 or higher, occurring within the next 18 months. An event of that magnitude will generate a significant tsunami. I am not defending a home improvement project. I am presenting a life-saving mitigation measure. There was a stunned silence in the room. I had just escalated the stakes from a neighborhood dispute to a state-level emergency preparedness issue. One of the commissioners, a woman with a background in coastal geology, looked at me with sharp, focused eyes. "Your models are predictive, Mr. Cole." "They are probabilistic," I corrected her gently. "They are based on the same methodologies used by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, but with a more granular focus on this specific topography. To ignore this data would be, in my professional opinion, an act of gross negligence." The commission voted unanimously to dismiss the complaint, commending my work as exemplary and proactive. As we filed out, Carol Ann shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I hadn't just beaten her. I had exposed her petty concerns as dangerously irrelevant in the face of a genuine threat. I had humiliated her, using the very expertise she dismissed as technical nonsense. Driving home, I felt no triumph, only a cold dread. I had backed her into a corner, stripped her of her bureaucratic weapons and her moral high ground. A creature, like Carol Ann, when cornered, doesn't surrender. She goes for the throat. The dismissal by the State Coastal Commission pushed Carol Ann over the edge from a neighborhood tyrant into something far more malevolent. Her final escalation was swift, direct, and designed to hit me where she thought I was most vulnerable. She confronted me at the edge of my property, clutching a manila folder. "This isn't about your wall anymore," she hissed, pulling out a printout of my professional bio from my old employer. "I did some research. Dr. Alexander Cole, lead consultant on the Sendai Sea Defenses. Quite an impressive career." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Important men have reputations," she continued, her eyes gleaming with malice. "All it would take is one phone call, a quiet word about a disturbed and unstable former employee engaged in erratic behavior, harassing his neighbors, showing signs of a breakdown." She was threatening to burn my legacy, to twist my life's work into a narrative of madness, all because she couldn't stand the sight of my wall. But in that moment, I understood her motivation completely. "You're terrified, aren't you?" I said, my voice quiet. "That storm in '98. It did more than just damage property. It destroyed your sense of security, your belief that this place was safe. And my wall. It's a constant, physical reminder of that fear. You hate it, because it tells a truth you can't bear to look at. For a second, her mask of fury cracked. I saw a flicker of raw, genuine pain in her eyes. My father invested everything he had in one of those businesses that went under, she whispered, the words ragged. It ruined him. It ruined our family. We rebuilt. We made this place perfect and safe. You are bringing the fear back. I won't let you destroy this community a second time with your ugly concrete and your doomsday charts. The flicker vanished, replaced by cold resolve. This is your last chance, she snarled. You will tear down that wall and build a pretty white one. If you don't, I will make it my mission to ensure that every professional contact you have hears that you've lost your mind. You have 48 hours to start demolition. The clock is ticking. She tossed the papers at my feet and walked away, supremely confident in her victory. She thought she had found my greatest vulnerability. In reality, she had just reminded me of who I really was. I was the man who stood between people and the water. The game had changed. The goal was no longer to coexist. The goal was to survive what I knew was coming. And she, in her tragic, terrified blindness, had just declared war on the one man who could save her. The final confrontation came less than 48 hours later. Carol Ann had called an emergency HOA meeting on the community green, overlooking the ocean and my property. The agenda: vote to approve emergency funds for the immediate removal of the non-compliant structure at Lot 47. She had even preempted the vote. A truck from ACME Demolition was already parked at my curb. The weather that Saturday was unnervingly calm. The sky was a bruised, heavy gray, the air thick and still. The ocean was flat and metallic, with an eerie, glassy surface. But it wasn't calm in my study. For the past 6 hours, I had been watching the data pour in. A massive 8.9 magnitude earthquake had ruptured the Aleutian Trench. A trans-Pacific tsunami was propagating south at the speed of a jetliner. My models, more precise than the generalized public warnings, predicted a catastrophic surge for our specific cove. Estimated time of arrival, 1:45 p.m. Right in the middle of Carol Ann's meeting. I gathered my waterproof pack and my marine VHF radio. Then I waited. The residents gathered on the green, setting up lawn chairs. Just as Carol Ann tapped the microphone, the first distant tsunami warning sirens began their mournful wail. "Just a drill, I'm sure," she said, annoyed. "Now, as you can see, I have already hired a crew to begin the removal of this blight." At that moment, every phone in the crowd shrieked in unison with the NWS alert, tsunami warning. Evacuate to higher ground immediately. Panic began to ripple through the crowd. The tide was now receding with unnatural speed, exposing the seabed in a terrifying spectacle. But Carol Ann, lost in her crusade, saw it as a divine sign. "Look!" she screamed into the mic, her voice ecstatic. "The ocean itself is pulling back from his ugly wall. It hates it as much as we do. Mother Nature is on our side." The demolition crew started their jackhammer. The deafening roar echoed as it bit into my wall. That's when I moved. I walked calmly to her podium, took the microphone from her stunned hand, and turned to the panicking crowd. My voice boomed with an authority they had never heard. "Listen to me!" The chaos subsided slightly. My name is Dr. Alexander Cole. For 28 years, I was the chief engineer for the UN's Global Disaster Mitigation Task Force. At the State Coastal Commission hearing 2 weeks ago, I warned them this was coming. I told them a magnitude 8.5 or greater event was imminent. The earthquake that struck the Aleutian Trench this morning was a magnitude 8.9. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Carol Ann's face was a canvas of utter ruin, the blood draining from it as if pulled by the receding tide. "I have been tracking this wave for 6 hours." I continued, my voice calm and precise. "You have less than 10 minutes. The evacuation point is 2 miles inland, at the elementary school. Run. Do not stop. Go now." I pointed at my wall. This structure is a Class 4, energy-dissipating revetment, designed to withstand a direct impact from a wave of up to 20 feet. It will hold. Then, I turned and pointed at their beautiful, million-dollar homes. "Your homes are wood frame structures built on sand and fill. They will be scoured from their foundations. They will not hold." The spell broke. The panic became a stampede. Carol Ann was the only one left, staring at me, her mind finally connecting the horrifying dots. You knew," she whispered. "You tried to tell us." I turned my back on her and walked calmly back to my house, sealing the storm shutters. The roar came first, a deep, primal sound that shook the air. Then, I saw it through the thick polycarbonate, not a wave, but a churning, rising wall of dark water filling the horizon. It hit my sea wall with a cataclysmic explosion. The house shook with a deafening, grinding roar, but my calculations had been correct. My engineering held. Through the spray, I watched as the waves slammed into the rest of Azure Point. The houses disintegrated. I watched Carol Ann's sprawling beige mansion get lifted from its foundation and simply erased, vanishing into the churning brown torrent. The waves scoured the bluff clean, leaving nothing behind. The beautiful, fragile illusion of Azure Point was gone. The aftermath was a scene of surreal devastation. Where manicured lawns had stood, there was now only a scarred, mud-caked landscape. The entire first row of homes had been annihilated. The only structure left standing on the waterfront was my own, protected by its ugly, unapproved, life-saving wall. The residents who had fled returned to find their world destroyed. My name was on everyone's lips, no longer as a curse, but as a prayer. They knew I had saved their lives. I became the de facto leader of the recovery. My past experience, grimly relevant. Carol Ann had survived. She was found clinging to a tree, battered, broke, and utterly broken. When the full story emerged, that she had actively suppressed my warnings and tried to demolish the one piece of life-saving infrastructure, the community's anger was immense. But it was tempered by a sad understanding of the fear that had driven her. Facing lawsuits and complete ostracization, she and her family left in the middle of the night a few weeks later, a tragic figure haunted by the very disaster she had, in her own twisted way, tried to prevent. The old HOA was dissolved in disgrace. A new community council was formed. Their first act was to hire me to design and oversee the construction of a new, comprehensive sea defense system for the entire coastline. The rebuilding took years, but it was done right. The new homes were built to stricter codes, protected by a long, curving wall of dark, formidable granite, an extension of my own original design. It wasn't pretty, but it was strong. It was a testament to the hard lesson they had all learned that you cannot build a pretty wall to hold back an ugly truth. I finally found the peace I had sought, not in quiet isolation, but in the heart of a community I had helped to save and rebuild. I still sit on my patio and watch the tide, but now, the ocean's rhythmic sigh sounds like a promise kept.